Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
You're listening to House of Cards.
Today, the game is different.
I want to gamble. Gambling is a very serious business. Is that clear?
Welcome to House of Cards. Dave Weishaupt with you here, deep from the swamps of Jersey. We got a great show coming up for you. If you follow the news, you know that Canada just had an explosion in their gambling industry. Online sports betting, online casinos, online poker all recently went live in Ontario and changed the gambling landscape. We're going to talk with a person who covers the Canadian gambling industry and writes all about the big stories coming out of Canada. Greg Warren is a veteran of the sports media from Canada, and now he covers the country's gambling industry for Sportshandle, USBets.com, and Better Collective. Greg's going to fill us in on the latest coming out of the incredible gambling industry just north of us. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Canadian gambling. So stick around. We'll be right back with House of Cards.
Yeah, you, come here. Haven't you heard? We don't need to hide anymore.
Now, we can shop privately for adult products at adamandeve.com. They've got massage oils, lingerie, and lots more we can't mention here.
Use offer code SPICE404.
They'll give you 50% off almost any one item, 3 free DVDs, free mystery gift, and free shipping. That's 50% off, free shipping, and more. Private shopping starts at adamandeve.com.
You're listening to House of Cards.
I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
No way.
I'll give you 3-1 odds.
No.
5-1.
No.
10-1.
You're on.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishaupt with you. House of Cards is brought to you by Drizzly, your online liquor store. Available in over 95 cities across North America, Drizzly offers a huge selection and competitive pricing with a side of personalized content. Now there's no need to leave the house. Get alcohol delivered in less than an hour by Drizzly. Head on over to drizzly.com and order today. And now get $5 off your first order of $20 or more when using promo code DRINK19 at checkout. Shop beer, wine, and liquor with drizzly.com. If you follow gambling news, you know that incredible things are happening in Canada. If you're a fan of sports betting, online casinos, or online poker, you might want to think about taking a trip this summer to Ontario because on April 4th, the Canadian gambling industry changed forever. And our returning guest knows all about it because he covers gaming in Canada. From Sportshandle, USBets.com, and Better Collective, we have Greg Warren on the line. Greg, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's such an incredible time in Canada. I mean, last week on the show, I think I told you off air, we had Paul Burns, the CEO and president of the Canadian Gaming Association, and he talked about how incredible the April 4th launch was for the industry. Now, I want to ask you, as a person who's worked in sports media for years in Canada and now covers gambling industry for USBets.com and Sportshandle, in your opinion, how important was April 4th to the Canadian gaming industry?
Right. So obviously a very exciting time up here in Ontario and for Canada officially, right? Ontario is the first province that's experiencing this type of regulated open market. So it's really Canada's first foray into this space. So yes, it was a very, very important day. But at the same time, Canada has had a very entrenched gray market for online gambling for a very long time, for even over 20 years in some spaces. So the shift to becoming a regulated market actually wasn't that dramatic. Obviously, it's a huge day to have a regulated market and have those consumer protections in place for people, and to have people come into a safe, regulated environment with their money and with their protections and with their responsible gaming. That was obviously huge. But as far as the transition goes, people have been gambling online here offshore for a very, very long time. So yes, April 4th was a very important day in many respects, but really the changes weren't too widespread, if I'm being honest, across Ontario.
You know, I want to ask you how the launch took place on April 4th. I mean, we're hearing who launched, but I'm very curious how it launched. I mean, at 12:01, did all the online platforms go live? Did some start early in the day? Did others come later in the day? I mean, what was it like on April 4th?
Right, yeah. So it was kind of exciting. Operators didn't really want to commit to a specific time that they were going to launch. Some were very keen to launch right at midnight. A few of them did. An example would be CoolBet Canada actually had the first unofficial bet placed in Ontario. They were the first to announce it on social media, at least. And that was a bet on Kansas to win the national championship game in the NCAA tournament. So that they went live pretty quickly within about 10-15 minutes after midnight, early on Monday morning. That was quickly followed up by PointsBet, BetRivers. All in all, we had 17 websites that actually went live at some point throughout the day on April 4th. And now that number has grown to 21 websites with many more coming. We do have 29 operators that are registered with the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. And they also need to secure an operating agreement with iGaming Ontario, which is another government subsidiary that's going to be kind of managing the day-to-day stuff and the payments portion of this whole market. So lots more operators to come. I mean, we could see anywhere between 30 and 40 here, maybe by the end of the month or into early May. But yeah, 17 websites at least went live on April the 4th at varying times, but there were a handful, maybe 3 to 5 of them that went live within the first hour of them being legally to do so.
Now, just to refresh everyone with the rules for Canada, you actually have to be physically present in the particular territory or province in order to place a bet or play online there. I mean, one person can't be in one province and try and play or place a bet on a site in another province, correct?
You got it, exactly.
Okay.
So you have to be physically located within the provincial borders of Ontario to access this market. So there's a company called GeoComply that really kind of oversees this, and they monitor the betting activity to make sure that people aren't accessing any of these sports betting or iGaming, iCasino games from other places, whether it's south in New York State, or maybe it's to the north and east in Quebec. They actually sent out an interesting tweet a couple days after the launch that showed a lot of failed attempts to access the Ontario market from nearby Quebec and the Montreal area. So that's about 30 miles roughly northeast of the Ontario border. So there was a significant amount of geolocation fails, they call it, at GeoComply. So you can obviously see that people are trying to access these games or getting as close to the border as possible. I was speaking with GeoComply about a month ago, and they really pay attention to border towns. So in Ontario, Niagara Falls shares the border with Buffalo. And we also have Windsor, Ontario, that basically shares the border with Detroit. So those border towns are very challenging for them, and they have to make sure that they're accurately predicting where these mobile devices and desktop devices are actually accessing these games, particularly in those areas, because the line is so thin between either the United States of America or Ontario and Quebec, or even Ontario and Manitoba. Manitoba borders Ontario to the west. So it's a very important element, and there are some stern regulations to make sure that this gambling is only taking place within Ontario.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards.
Drizzly makes it easy to shop a huge selection of beer, wine, and liquor from wherever I am. I just open the app, find what I want, and it's at my door in under 60 minutes.
Drizzly. Ding dong, Drizzly.
You're listening to the House of Cards.
You lose track of time in those casinos. There's no windows, there's no clocks, and you never walk away from the table when you're on a heater.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishottle with you. House of Cards is brought to you by Drizzly, your online liquor store. Available in over 95 cities across North America, Drizzly offers a huge selection and competitive pricing with a side of personalized content. Now there's no need to leave the house. Get alcohol delivered in less than an hour by Drizzly. Head on over to drizzly.com and order today. And now get $5 off your first order of $20 or more when using promo code DRINK19 at checkout. Shop beer, wine, and liquor with drizzly.com. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Greg Warren from Sports Handle, USBets.com, and Better Collective. You know, I was going to ask you about that because anytime there's a big betting event in the U.S., like March Madness or the Super Bowl, there's always news stories about people who tried to access one state's online sites from another state. I think just a couple days ago, I think there was a lot of people from Kentucky trying to gamble outside of Kentucky. But I'm very curious, where did most of the fails come from when it came to the Canada market? And is everyone very happy with the technology to protect the geofencing?
Understood. Yeah. So it's actually been fairly understood too, especially once New York State went live. A lot of Canadians were actually coming down to the border once they were allowed to, of course, due to the COVID border restrictions that we had between Canada and the U.S. So that restricted travel for a little bit. As far as the geolocation technology goes, there have been some hiccups, just like there are with any launch. Sure. Just if you do any kind of Twitter search, you'll see a lot of users complaining that some of these operators weren't able to really pinpoint exactly where they were, especially people that are in those border towns, like Niagara Falls and like Windsor in Ontario. So there's some kinks to be ironed out there, but I think that's expected to be with any launch. There are some people complaining that some of the geolocation technology is failing, and then these operators couldn't verify their location. So that, of course, kind of delayed them opening their accounts initially in Ontario. So obviously a few kinks to be worked out there, but I think in the coming weeks and months that'll all get ironed out to basically as much as it can be.
Well, in terms of the technology, I mean, going beyond the border issues or anything to geo-comply, generally, how did the April 4th opening go? I mean, did you hear about any other problems or glitches with the actual system or the actual playing systems? I mean, was everyone generally pleased about how everything went that day?
Right. I would say the general consensus is that it did go pretty well. I think you'll see a lot of the professional bettors in Ontario, a lot of the people that would make the trek to Vegas, or a lot of the hardcore gamblers had a lot of complaints. I did notice a lot of complaints, particularly against Bet365. They had some issues with they transitioned from the gray market to the white market in Ontario, and there was some complications with people changing over their accounts and being able to cash out their accounts and being able to flip their accounts over. So I did hear some complaints about Bet365 in particular, a few, of course, regarding BetMGM and BetRivers as well, but nothing so widespread that these operators were basically offline, or you couldn't create an account for days or even weeks at this point. So no major issues. I mean, if you want to nitpick, of course, there were a few things that kind of ticked bettors off in Ontario, but overall, I would say that it did go pretty well from the perspective of the consumer, for sure.
I want to ask you first about the sports betting launch. I mean, who were the major operators that went live on April 4th, and who are the major operators that have gone live since April 4th?
Right. Yeah. So, of course, some of the bigger sports books, Bet365 is really big in Canada and in Ontario. They have already an estimated 35% of the sports betting share in the province. They had that before this market went live because they were operating as a gray book in Ontario, and they're very popular in Canada. So they, of course, went live on April the 4th. We had BetMGM, BetRivers, Caesars, FanDuel, CoolBet, PointsBet, 888 was one of the other sports books that launched on the sports betting and kind of iGaming side. We had a company called Rivalry. They're based out of Toronto, Ontario. They're offering esports, iCasino, and sports betting too. Royal Panda. Another local option that's kind of cool in my opinion is the Score Bet. They're also based out of Toronto and have been advocates of sports betting in Ontario for a very long time. So they went live. I personally signed up for an account with them because I used to work there and I was kind of interested in their product. So at Unibet as well also went live on April the 4th. Some sports books that we'll see shortly. A notable omission really is DraftKings. Everyone's waiting for DraftKings to arrive, and I'm hearing that will be probably a matter of days or weeks at this point before they get in. They're in the process of applying for a license. They're in the middle of that process, and it's trying to be rushed through. So I think a lot of Ontarians are excited about the potential arrival of DraftKings, and you're also going to see some other iGaming operators and sports betting operators like Betway, BetRegal, Pinnacle, Bet99. All of those sports books will be available probably in the next few weeks or even to kind of the mid-May range is what I'm hearing after talking to a few of the operators there.
I love the fact that you mentioned some of the sports books that, people in the United States may not be too familiar with. What are the ones that are uniquely Canadian? I mean, some of the ones that may not be well known in the United States. I mean, certainly we've heard the FanDuel and the MGMs, but you've mentioned a couple that I've never heard of.
Yeah, exactly. So Rivalry is one. They're based out of Toronto. They have a really creative CEO there. His name is Steven Sauls. He's a great interview. If you're ever looking for some fresh Canadian content, he'd be great to have on your show. He's a very animated, fun guy and very passionate person about the industry. So they're very exciting, and they've been very active doing the media rounds and really pushing for the opening of the market. The Score, of course, they've been operating in Ontario for 20 to 30 years. They started as a specialty cable network. They were known for having really great sports highlights initially, and they eventually sold that business and went into the digital space. They have a very popular app in North America and even worldwide. I'm sure a lot of Americans have probably downloaded the Score app. Great for news, great for scores, and they're using that platform and basically merging it to allow betting on the app. So the hope is for them that they're going to convert a lot of their existing users that they have for their sports app into their sports book now. And they just inked a huge partnership with the Toronto Blue Jays, a big 10-year deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. So they're going to be going in and they're going to have a restaurant and sports betting kiosks and booths all over the Rogers Center where the Toronto Blue Jays play. So that's I'd say the Score Bet is probably, as far as local options go, definitely one of the more unique sports books in Ontario and one of the more exciting local plays.
I know it's only been a little over a week since the launch, but have there been any numbers or trends with regard to sports books and sports betting so far? I know you recently reported some numbers with regard to Bet Rivers for the first week. How are things going with regard to the numbers and the trends?
Right, exactly. So unfortunately, I was actually speaking with regulators yesterday, and there isn't actually a plan to be releasing any hardcore revenue numbers or anything at this point. A lot of the sports books, because the competition is so fierce, a lot of them are holding their cards close to their chest right now, and they don't really want to be revealing any numbers. What I can tell you are the numbers from Bet Rivers. They released a few statistics. So the most popular sports event in the opening weekend was, of course, the Masters Golf Tournament, predictively.
Sure.
They said that accounted for about 17% of their total weekend sports handle. And this stat actually really shocked me. They said the NBA has been the most popular sport thus far, receiving 36% of their total handle.
Interesting.
Followed by Major League Baseball at 14%. So I think that might kind of correspond to how the Toronto Raptors have been playing lately. They've been especially hot, kind of rolling into their first round playoff matchup with the Philadelphia 76ers this weekend. And of course, Bet Rivers did say that the Toronto Raptors and the Toronto Blue Jays have been extremely popular teams to bet in Ontario so far. A lot of people showing love for their local teams. So from the iGaming side, they said that slots followed by blackjack and table games were the most popular game types in their particular online casino during the first week. So I'm a little surprised that they're there aren't higher hockey numbers, to be honest.
Right. I saw that. I was like, where's the hockey?
Yeah, we have a couple professional hockey teams in Ontario, the Ottawa Senators, who aren't doing so well this year and aren't as popular as the Toronto Maple Leafs, of course, who are by far the most popular team in Canada, along with the Montreal Canadiens. So I'm a little surprised that hockey didn't get a mention in those numbers from BetRivers, but I think coming into the playoffs here in a couple of weeks in the NHL, hockey will obviously account for a huge amount of their handle.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards. Hey, this is Dave Weishuttle from House of Cards with your House of Cards gaming report for the week of April 18, 2022. In their latest commercial gaming revenue tracker, the American Gaming Association reported that the United States commercial gaming industry is off to its fastest start ever in 2022. According to the AGA's report, the commercial gaming industry generated $8.92 billion in revenue in the first 2 months of this year. This figure is up more than 19% from the previous record set in 2020. The state of Michigan joined the multi-state internet gaming agreement. By entering into this agreement, the online poker players in the Wolverine state will be able to play with people in Nevada, New Jersey, and Delaware. Currently, there are 3 online poker sites operating in Michigan: BetMGM, PokerStars, and WSOP.com, and only WSOP.com currently offers pooled players. And finally, the Palms Las Vegas announced that it will be reopening soon. After being shut down for 2 years, the iconic Vegas property will open its doors to the public on April 27th. The casino is owned by the San Miguel tribe and is the first Las Vegas property owned and operated by a Native American tribe. Customers will be able to enjoy a new gaming floor layout and stay at the hotel just in time for the NFL Draft. Have any news or tips regarding casinos, gaming, or legislation? Send us an email at newsroom@houseofcardsradio.com and follow us on Twitter at HOC Radio.
You're listening to the House of Cards.
Why, you cheap crook, stealing a baby's bank. It's only a lend-lease. I figured to bet on the 50-to-1 shot and double the baby's money. Why, you imbecile. Why don't you pick a 100-to-1 shot and triple it? Oh, okay.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Greg Warren from Sports Handle, USBets.com, and Better Collective. Now, you mentioned the sports teams. I know every week in the U.S. you hear about deals with sports leagues and the sportsbook operators. Is that the case in Canada? I know on Sports Handle you wrote about FanDuel and PokerStars forming a joint partnership with the Maple Leafs group, and you also wrote about Toronto Blue Jays partnering with ScoreBet. And I just saw a press release that the Maple Leafs also did a partnership with PointsBet. Tell us about those deals and what can fans expect from those agreements?
Yeah, exactly. So the real plum partnership here in Ontario and really across Canada is Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. So they have ownership stakes in a lot of the professional teams in Ontario, including the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Toronto Raptors, Toronto FC in MLS, and also the Toronto Argonauts in the Canadian Football League. They also have the ownership rights to Raptors 905, the G League affiliate for the Toronto Raptors, and the Toronto Marlies, who are the AHL, American Hockey League affiliate for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So FanDuel and PointsBet, I think people are a little surprised that PointsBet kind of edged into that, and it wasn't an exclusive deal just with one sportsbook with MOSE. But what you are going to see is sportsbooks basically popping up in the venues for these major teams. And of course, I previously spoke about the Toronto Blue Jays with the ScoreBet sneaking in to grab that kind of local team as well. So, and they're going to go in and basically make a new restaurant, sports bar, kind of sports betting bar concept. They don't have a timeline for when this restaurant's going to launch, but it's going to be on site at the Rogers Center. So you're going to see these sports books really have the edge as far as advertising goes, whether that's digital or in arena or in stadium advertising. You're going to see them on some of the broadcasts. FanDuel also has a deal with TSN, which is the Canadian equivalent of ESPN. So you're going to see a lot more sports betting advertising and stats integrated into the broadcast that you'll see for the Toronto Raptors and the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Toronto Argonauts. So that those really are the significant partnerships that have been formed so far. I kind of the general consensus, the rumors were that maybe DraftKings would be edging in for one of these major partnerships, but it looks like they've missed the boat on that one.
You know, I was going to ask you about that because here in the U.S., there's a lot of legislation in a lot of states to allow sports books in the stadium and arenas. I mean, Washington, D.C. already has that. Pennsylvania just had a restaurant open up an actual sports book in their place. Are we going to see expansion like that in Canada? I mean, not just in Ontario, but do you think in the other provinces as well?
Right. So all eyes are on Ontario right now.
Yeah.
One province that is definitely interested in potentially opening up their market is Alberta. Alberta already has a RFP out to have two sports betting operators enter the province, and they want to basically have sports betting kiosks and sports books set up in the major venues for their professional sports teams. So over there in the NHL, you have the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers. You also have two Canadian Football League franchises in Alberta, the Calgary Stampeders and the Edmonton Elks. So yes, Alberta is definitely interested in that. All the other provinces are just going to kind of step back and see what's happening in Ontario. Without any, this is just a hunch that I have. I don't have any evidence to back this up, but I do think that maybe we'll see Alberta next, followed by British Columbia. I think British Columbia will eventually get on board, and then possibly followed by Quebec. Some of the other provinces, you probably won't see them basically open up their markets. And even Alberta is taking a very cautious approach by only initially allowing two operators into the province. So we don't know who those operators are going to be yet. I'm told that it's a very demanding RFP and a very unique RFP. So we'll see hopefully in the coming months who's going to prevail there. So I actually was told that there could be a partnership announcement between one of the sports books that's going to be entering Ontario shortly with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who are in Manitoba, the CFL franchise there. So that could be kind of the start of some momentum towards maybe Manitoba being open to a regulated market as well. But we'll see. We'll see how it all pans out.
So do you think in the future coming weeks or the future coming months, do you think we're going to see an explosion of professional leagues and Canadian sportsbook operators just making deals? And I want to ask you another question. We were talking about this, a couple other attorneys that do gaming law. We were thinking, do you think that U.S. teams could start making deals with Canadian sportsbooks in the future? I mean, if you're the Toronto Blue Jays and you're playing at home, you're playing against a U.S. team. Do you think that U.S. teams could start making deals with Canadian sportsbook operators?
Yeah, you know what? That's kind of an interesting concept, and that's something I haven't really thought about yet. I definitely could see the Score Bet possibly inking some kind of partnership in the United States. I know they're live. I believe don't quote me on this, but in 4 states. I believe it's Iowa, New Jersey, and there's 2 others. It's slipping my mind exactly where they are right now. So I could definitely see the Score Bet especially because they're basically teamed up with Penn National. Mm-hmm. I think they definitely would have the budget to possibly to edge in maybe more on, maybe not on like a professional level with like an established NHL franchise or baseball franchise, but maybe more on like an AHL level or maybe a AAA level in baseball, maybe something like that. So that you're right. That'll be something interesting to monitor. I think everyone's really focused in Ontario right now. And I think the Canadian sports books at least are really going to focus on the expansion across Canada first. Again, that's just an assumption I'm making, but maybe I could see the Score Bet potentially maybe at least investigating a partnership somewhere in the United States. That could happen.
Now, as I said in the introduction, Canada also has online casinos as well. Who are the operators for the online casino platforms now?
Right. Yeah. So online casino, I did mention a few already.
Yep.
So a lot of these sports books too, they do have casino offerings, right? Like Bet Rivers.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are playing there. 888 is a popular one. Cool Bet is kind of a new customer in Canada. They were operating as a gray operator, and now they've gone to white. They're licensed out of Malta, and they seem actually like a really cool sports book. They've been getting some positive media lately. They've got really great customer service, and they're fully transparent, so you can see any bets that are placed as they happen live on the site. I thought that was pretty cool. So Poker Stars will be coming, partypoker.ca, partycasino.ca, partysports.ca, Royal Panda. Leo Vegas as well is a licensed operator now in Ontario. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of on the iGaming side, who Canadians are playing with at this point.
You know, I'm glad you brought up the sports books and the online casino combination, because here in New Jersey, when I go to a sports book, they have a tab that says online casino. Are you seeing that also in Canada, that these partnerships between the sports books and casinos, do you see a lot of that in Canada? And in New Jersey, there's some even with a shared wallet. So if you go to FanDuel and you go to their online casino site, you know, you play with the same bankroll. Is that the way it's happening in Canada as well?
Right. So the iGaming license in Canada, it's all encompassing. So you're allowed to have, operators are allowed to have their sports betting, iCasino, and esports products all wrapped into one. So you don't have to apply for any individual licenses depending on what you're going to be offering. So that's a very positive aspect, at least what I'm hearing from operators. They really do like that aspect of the legal framework surrounding this market. And yeah, the shared wallet definitely exists. I can speak from experience. I signed up for a Score Bet account, and I was able just to roll over my balance and play a few casino games on there as well. Whether you wanted to, play a few poker hands or a little blackjack, a little roulette, whatever you may want, or some slots. So yes, you do have that option to roll over. A lot of focus in Ontario right now has been on the sports betting side. There hasn't been a ton of talk surrounding the esports and iCasino offerings at this point. And you're not seeing kind of any partnerships as far as specific partnerships anyways, that are basically just focused on the esports or iCasino. I think that's coming. The sports betting has really been the exciting part so far in Ontario.
Now, when we're talking about the online casinos, are we talking about all the games that you would find in a brick and mortar casino? I mean, are there some games that you're not going to find? Is it basically all slots, craps, roulette, and games like that?
Yeah, so I've fished around a little bit, just myself since the market has gone live, and to be honest, it does look like a lot of the same offerings. I'm sure there are some unique offerings out there that maybe I haven't discovered yet, but from what I'm gathering, obviously poker is huge, blackjack is huge, roulette is huge, craps, and people do love slots as well. Lottery has also always been very, very big in Ontario and across Canada. People love scratch tickets and lottery offerings across the country and in Ontario. So I'm sure there are some unique offerings out there, but I haven't really heard of anything that's eye-catching at this point.
Well, you mentioned poker, and let me ask you about the online poker that went live. I know 888 Poker, and I think very recently Party Poker were the first licensed online poker sites to go live in Ontario. I mean, are they the only two so far, and are there plans for others to go live in Ontario?
Yes, understood. That's actually an aspect that I haven't looked into. I was going to be looking into that today because I have noticed a little bit of buzz surrounding the poker scene in Ontario. So I'll be honest, I'm not particularly well versed in the poker realm yet, and exactly what's going to be offered in Canada and who's operating on that front. So I'll definitely have to get back to you on that, but I'm just not up to speed on the poker aspect of the iGaming industry yet, just with the focus really being almost entirely on sports betting so far in Ontario.
Well, let me ask you just a general question about online poker. Is it the same as it will be in the U.S., meaning that the provinces and the territories will have their own online poker sites and people outside of the territories can't play them? Is it the same way that it's going to be done like that? And do you think in the future there's going to be, I can't call them interstate compacts, but inter-province compacts where, like it is in the U.S., people from different states can play under the same platform?
Right. So I was actually speaking with Paul Burns about this, who was on your show recently. Sure. And yes, right now, ring fencing, it's basically up to each individual province to conduct and manage gambling within their provincial borders. So it's very much like the United States, where Ontario players are only going to be able to play with Ontario players. They're not going to be able to mingle with people from Manitoba or people from Quebec. So right now, that's exactly the case. Paul was optimistic that he thinks in the future that you could see some more shared liquidity between the provinces. He thinks that we can get there, but that's probably a few years away at this point. Obviously, that would be a huge advantage, and I'm sure in the United States as well. The more people you can get involved and the more interstate or inter-province mingling you can have, it's only going to increase prize pool and then the experience for the consumer. So I think in Canada we'll get there, but just like the United States, you're right. It's just managed within province right now.
I'm glad you brought up Paul Burns, who, just reminding everyone, he's the CEO and president of the Canadian Gaming Association. I asked him about the other provinces in the country, what we can expect from them now that Ontario has launched all these sites. He told me that the other provinces will have a wait-and-see attitude toward Ontario. They want to see how everything works out. And you mentioned a couple other provinces, but can you go over that again? From your conversations with your contacts in the gaming industry, what have you heard from the other provinces? And is there a province that you expect will jump into the regulated online gaming scene next?
Right, exactly. So I did touch on this a little bit earlier in our conversation. So Alberta is definitely going to be the first province to jump. They're going to allow 2 operators in. The RFP is out. We're just waiting to see who it's going to be awarded to. Their goal is to have regulated online sports betting up and running by the end of the year in that province, according to the regulators. That's what they want. Whether that happens or not, it might actually spill into next year, but we'll see. Another province that I didn't mention is Saskatchewan. So they have a tribal organization there called the Saskatchewan Indian Gaming Authority. They also have a request for proposal out to basically launch online and also in their I believe they have 7 or 11 casinos in Saskatchewan, but they want to have sports betting offerings in there and an online product there. So we are going to see an operator basically coming in to help with that specific tribal entity in Saskatchewan as well. So if these go well, I think and Ontario goes well, the legal framework will be there, and I think it will be pretty much almost a copy and paste effort into the other provinces, obviously with some regional tweaks depending on the province, and maybe they want to make some slight modifications. But yes, it is a wait and see approach with Ontario right now, but you're going to see Alberta, and if things go well there, Saskatchewan as well. If things go well there, you're definitely going to see maybe more operators enter those provinces specifically. As far as the east coast of Canada goes, I think that they might be the last kind of group of provinces to go. I'm talking about Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland and Labrador, Prince Edward Island as well. So I don't think you'll see a regulated market there anytime soon. And it could pique the interest of British Columbia, which would be appealing for operators as well. They have a good population base, and of course, share the border with the United States. You got Seattle just to the south of Vancouver, which is the most populous city in British Columbia. So we'll see.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards.
You're listening to the House of Cards.
You lose track of time in those casinos. There's no windows, there's no clocks, and you never walk away from the table when you're on a heater.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishottle with you. House of Cards is brought to you by Drizzly, your online liquor store. Available in over 95 cities across North America, Drizzly offers a huge selection and competitive pricing with a side of personalized content. Now there's no need to leave the house. Get alcohol delivered in less than an hour by Drizzly. Head on over to drizzly.com and order today. And now get $5 off your first order of $20 or more when using promo code DRINK19 at checkout. Shop beer, wine, and liquor with drizzly.com. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Greg Warren from Sports Handle, USBets.com, and Better Collective. One of the aspects of your online gaming platforms in Canada is the advertising aspects of it. I live in the northeastern part of the United States, and you can't watch television or listen to the radio or drive by a billboard without seeing or hearing advertisements for online sportsbooks or online casinos. When it comes to advertising in Canada, are there any restrictions, and what are the regulations that online sites have to adhere to?
Right. So this has been a huge issue actually in Ontario, and a lot of operators aren't happy about it because they're not allowed to publicly promote any of their bonus or sign-up offers. So there needs to be a level of consent before any bonus offers or deposit offers can be revealed to the consumer. So what we've seen in Canada is a lot of, you won't see anything on social media or on billboards as far as those offers go. There are all kinds of billboards up, especially around the Toronto area. The Score Bet has a big one. I know that FanDuel has a few, and CoolBet also has some advertising. You're seeing it on all kinds of the sports broadcasts here north of the border. We're being bombarded, especially with Wayne Gretzky's BetMGM ad. That's one that comes to mind right away. Austin Matthews is linked up with Bet99. Bet99 is going to be entering the regulated market. They're in the process with an application. So you're seeing, with him being such a huge figure in sports, Connor McDavid also signed on with BetMGM. So you're seeing a lot of advertising there. But it's been frustrating for the operators because they haven't been able to really get their bonus and promotional offers out there. And obviously it's a key time within the first few weeks of the launch to try to acquire as many users as possible to your sportsbook. So, and it's frustrating for the consumers too, because there's a lot of digging. Basically, they're only allowed to advertise these offers with a level of consent, or if people go directly to their landing pages or directly to their app. So it has been frustrating. There are a lot of regulations, but the intent is to protect consumers. But as far as TV advertising goes and radio advertising goes, it's not controlled by anything right now. I know that iGaming Ontario does have the legal responsibility at some point to step in if they think it's getting out of hand. And I would almost argue that it is getting out of hand at this point. Yeah. I know I've watched a couple Blue Jays games or Toronto Maple Leafs games, and every single commercial you're seeing Bet365 or BetMGM, you're being bombarded with one or two sports betting advertisements. So there's definitely been a noticeable increase around Canada and around Ontario specifically. And it's something that we're going to have to monitor, and it really could be capped at some point here.
You know, you alluded to this subject a little bit before, but what has the Canadian gaming industry's response been with regard to offshore and unlicensed platforms now that they have regulated sites in Ontario? What is the message that the Canadian gaming industry is trying to relay to those potential customers out there with regard to offshore and unlicensed platforms?
Right. So there's a lot of tension there, especially for the new sports books entering the market. When I say that, I mean someone like the Score Bet or someone like PointsBet who weren't previously operating in Ontario. A lot of them believe that the companies like Bet365 have a huge head start on the market, and really the process for them to convert a customer has just been basically signing new terms and conditions and basically moving their accounts to an Ontario-based account. So it's been very easy for the gray market operators to convert. And I know a lot of these companies that are starting fresh in Ontario are extremely frustrated by that, and they feel like that they might be potentially behind the ball on this. They do think that their products will eventually win out, but there is a lot of tension there between the gray market operators and the new prospects in Ontario. There are many gray sports books that are still operating in the province. I'm going to be writing an article on this next week, that as long as they're in the application process with the AGCO and iGaming Ontario, they're still allowed to operate in the province. So that's very frustrating for some operators, that this has been allowed. The AGCO has been very lenient in regards to kind of their rules surrounding gray operators. So it's not going over well with some, and it really is advantageous to the existing gray books that have converted to the regulated market.
Well, speaking of online gambling and also articles that you have written, you wrote a great one on USBets.com about a study that was conducted dealing with online gambling and the impact COVID had on this activity. Who conducted that study, and what was the result of the study?
Right, yeah. So that was done by the Responsible Gaming Council. They're based out of Toronto, so the heart of Ontario. Basically, it's kind of what you would expect, what would happen during a pandemic. In Ontario, we had a very unique situation. We had a wave of rolling lockdowns. And when I say lockdowns, I mean, people were really almost confined to their homes. You couldn't even have social gatherings of more than 5 people at your own home at one point. Businesses were shut down. Casinos were shut down, which is a huge thing. And these waves of shutdowns basically have gone on for the last 2 to 2.5 years. And it's really impacted the way that people are gambling, of course. If you can't go to a casino, you're going to go online. And that's basically what the study concluded. And the really troubling part of it is that people were gambling with the intent to make up for their lost income due to losing their jobs or not being able to go into work. In particular, the service industry was hammered here in Ontario and across Canada. There were all kinds of shutdowns with restaurants and lots of restaurants and bars going out of business. So people in that sector were very affected financially by the pandemic. And so this study concluded that, look, people were gambling with the intent to make up for that lost income. So that's especially troubling. And they noted, not surprisingly with the pandemic, higher rates of anxiety and depression, and even people having suicidal thoughts. So obviously not a good correlation with gambling, but sure. And even just from an entertainment perspective, if you can't leave your house to go to a restaurant or to go watch the Toronto Blue Jays or the Toronto Raptors, I mean, if you can remember, the Raptors were shipped down to Florida. They couldn't even play their home games here in Toronto, right? They were playing out of Orlando at one point during the pandemic. So people were flocking to online websites for entertainment. So I'll be interested to see the studies that kind of come in the next few months and years, and to see if people will return to the brick and mortar casinos, because we do have a thriving casino kind of culture here, especially in Southern Ontario. There's a lot of options for people particularly in Windsor and the Niagara area. We have some really great casinos here. So it's interesting to see if people are going to come back or not, or if they're just going to remain online.
Well, certainly April 4th was only the beginning for Canada. In terms of growth, what do you expect from the coming months and years?
Right, exactly. So the Ontario market is estimated to produce around $1 billion in revenue in the first year. And there are other projections that within 5 years, they think that could grow to around $28 billion across Canada, depending on if other provinces adopt these open models that Ontario is using now. So I think the future looks bright. I think a lot of operators want to get in at the grassroots level here with Ontario. And some of the operators I've talked to have been very interested in expanding their offerings to other provinces if they'll have them. So I think Canada's a really big opportunity for operators and specifically Ontario. And we really should see it grow as long as operators are responsible and consumers are protected and responsible gaming is a priority as we move forward with things, that there's no reason to believe that this industry can't grow and really be dominant across Ontario and across Canada.
Greg, we're running out of time, but can you give out a website where people can read your articles, and can you give out your social media address so people can keep up with what you're doing?
Absolutely. So you can find me on sportshandle.com and usbets.com. You can follow me on Twitter at GregWarrenBC for Better Collective.
Greg Warren from Sportshandle, USBets.com, and Better Collective, thanks so much for coming on and giving us an update about what's going on in Canada. It's an incredible gambling market. It's just going to get bigger and better. I got a feeling we're going to talk to you again very soon because in terms of gaming, Canada is making news every week. So thanks for coming on. I hope to talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, that'll do it for us this week. We'll talk to you later on House of Cards.
Drag a spotted chain across the desert.